Suppose you're driving your car at a speed of 100 miles per hour and one of your car's tires blows out in a trice. Before you understand the gravity of the situation, one more tire goes off almost instantly. You may end up driving into the abutment with your car deliberated and yourself writhing in pain. That is exactly what has happened to Xi Jinping. China's economy blew up midway as Jinping was cherishing the ambitions of conquering the entire world. And now Jinping is left writhing in pain. The world, meanwhile, is embracing a new champion, Taiwan. The tiny democratic nation has finally shown the world its true potential. Hi and welcome. You're watching TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I'm your host Atul Mishra, and in this video I will tell you how the world is slowly abandoning China for Taiwan. Let's begin. Taiwan has caught the Chinese Communist Party napping in the Second World War era battleground of the Solomon Islands. In 2019, the CCP had managed to induce the Solomon Islands into dumping its close ally Taiwan and establishing formal diplomatic ties with Beijing instead. However, a people's movement and ethnic violence in the Pacific island country is now compelling the Solomon government into switching diplomatic ties all over again and recognizing Taiwan. In fact, the Telegraph has reported that as per Daniel Swidani, the leader of Malaita, the second largest province in the Solomon Islands, the country could switch formal recognition from China to Taiwan if Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare is ejected by a no-confidence motion. Swidani has also warned that his province would look for independence if the Prime Minister doesn't stand down. The Solomon Islands is presently at the brink of a civil war, and there is increasing friction between the federal government of the island nation and the provincial government of Malaita, the second largest and most populous province in the archipelago. On November 24, around 1,000 people held a peaceful anti-government rally in the capital, Honiara. However, it doesn't take much time for angry demonstrations to turn violent. And in the Solomon Islands too, violence, looting and arson followed in what started as a peaceful rally. With 3 people dying in the ensuing violence, the Solomon Islands had to seek help from region's biggest power, Australia, which was happy to oblige. The ongoing violence in the Solomon Islands has opened up old wounds. The country is historically famous as a battleground of the Second World War, and the crucial Battle of Guadalcanal too is named after the country's largest island, where the capital, Honiara, is located. Later in the 1990s, the archipelago nation was gripped by ethnic tension when the inhabitants of the Malaita province had migrated in large numbers in search of economic opportunities to Guadalcanal and Honiara. In the late 1990s, a brutal and aggressive campaign was launched by native Guadalcanal islanders known as Gwales to drive the Malaitans off the island. The aggressive campaign against the Malaitans had then led to sheer anarchy in the Solomon Islands. An armed group called the Malaita Eagle Force Militia was set up to protect the Malaitans. The militia managed to capture the then Prime Minister, Bartholomew Ulufalu, a Malaitan himself, because the Malaitans thought that he was not doing enough for their cause. Ulufalu had then resigned in exchange for his life and liberty, and the current Prime Minister, Manasseh Sogavare, took over. As such, the ethnic violence of the 1990s and 2000s broadly divided the Solomon Islands on ethnic lines between the Malaitans and the Gwales. When the Solomon Islands slipped into widespread ethnic violence and conflict around 2 to 3 decades ago, China was nowhere in the picture. The conflict between Malaitans and Gwales was an internal matter for the Solomon Islands, and the country had requested only Australia and New Zealand for help. So how did China become a cause of ethnic violence in the archipelago nation? Well, let's go back in time to 2019. In 2019, Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare decided to abandon his country's close ally Taiwan and establish formal relations with China instead. Jonathan Pryke, director of the Low Institute's Pacific Island program, believes that Sogavare's decision was based on financial calculations. Pryke said, "The calculus at the end of the day would have been that the Solomon Islands can get more out of this relationship with China than Taiwan, and that was how it was sold to the Solomon Islands people." However, the federal government's decision to recognize China and abandon Taiwan didn't go down well with Malaita, the most populous province in the archipelago nation, banned Chinese companies, and also said yes to American aid. Malaita Premier Daniel Swidani kept supporting Taiwan and even flew to the island nation for medical treatment in June. The geopolitics around China and Taiwan is now becoming a contentious issue between the provincial government in Malaita and the federal government. Malaitans are directing much of their anger against China. In fact, some buildings were also burnt in parts of the Chinatown district during the recent spell of ethnic violence in the Solomon Islands. In 2019, China thought that it had successfully purchased the loyalty of the Solomon Islands. However, it seems that Taiwan, its allies like Australia and the US, and the province of Malaita are on the verge of staging a major turnaround by forcing the federal government of the Solomon Islands into recognizing Taiwan all over again at the expense of the CCP.